Tēnā koutou, my name is Laura Davies and I'm a collection specialist at the New Zealand Maritime Museum.
Morena, I'm Lee and I'm the collections coordinator at Howick Historical Village.
In 2024, I was lucky enough to be part of Maritime's Digi-Hub project that was run by Heidi Schlumpf and Andrew Howes. The project went to 3 institutions around Auckland to start the process of digitisation for their collections. Part of this process was linking large volumes of images to whatever collection management software was in use for that organisation. One museum that we worked with was Howick Historical Village.
At the time, at the start of the Digi-Hub project at Howick Historical Village, we'd just begun moving over from eHive after about a decade or so of using it. As such, we didn't have any processes for using Vernon, and Maritime helped us to adapt their processes to our system.
Most of you might already be familiar with bulk image linking, but we thought we would share what processes we use and how the two institutions have used different Vernon tools to make sure the linking goes smoothly. Linking images to Vernon object records is just a small part of a much larger process, and the decisions you make at the beginning of your process will impact you later. In our process to link an image to an object record in Vernon, we need to have a number and it needs to be in Vernon. This is a very, very strict rule. Both Maritime and Howick Historical Village use accession numbers for our labeling our images. And so every item captured must start with an accession number.
At both New Zealand Maritime and Howick Historical Village, because of the sheer amount of items we're photographing, to capture the images, we rely on a software called DSLR Remote Pro. This allows us to take the photos remotely from the camera while simultaneously assigning the photographs labels and saving them to our computer. We use accession numbers formatted with points as opposed to hyphens in Vernon, and so to make it easier for the computer, when we take the photos, we do temporarily change the point to a hyphen, but this will be changed back later. You'd still be able to achieve a similar process without DSLR Remote Pro. You just have to rename the files manually after you photographed them.
The final stage is to link. You can always manually create an AV record in Vernon and then link to the object. However, when you're taking hundreds of photos that might be linked to hundreds of object records, this is just not time efficient. Because the process at Maritime has been set up, I find I almost never create individual AV records anymore. Because Vernon creates the AV record and then links it for me, it removes extra steps I would normally need to take. And that can be helpful even if you're linking 4 images just to one record, especially if the process is already set up for you. This is the configuration that we use for our linking. Both our institutions use very similar ones. This is the only configuration we use when linking our digitization images. We don't use any other ones where this is our go-to one that we use. And the only thing that you really need to change each time is obviously your image directory, so where you're telling it to be linked. You can also change other minor things depending on what you're linking. Sometimes we'll change publication status to make sure it doesn't go online. And we can also enable or disable the link as primary image button that's there. But importantly, we never save over this configuration. So it should always be the same each time you know it's open, so you know what to expect. So generally, this is what you open. And then if you need to change it, but it should always go back to this as the default. We do have another configuration for system IDs. So this one's specifically for accession numbers, but if we might not have an accession number at that stage and we need to link it system IDs, we do have another configuration at NZMM. But so you can set up a few examples if needed, but we found it's really easier if you're consistent with your labeling images and how you're storing and filing your images, so you don't have to worry about creating a new configuration each time. This part of the configuration is why it's important to have consistency for numbering and naming images. So this part, the mapping on the side. As mentioned previously, part of digitization, everything must have an accession number, and Lee talked about naming images with hyphens instead of points. And this is where you tell Vernon to map anything that's a hyphen back to a point, as well as telling Vernon anything, and the underscore is not part of the accession number. This way, Vernon knows which record it is linking to photograph to. And again, it's just consistency because we make sure our images are always labeled the same way. We can always just use this configuration. And this also holds true for how we're storing our images.
Once you have your configuration, the next step is obviously to tell Vernon the images that you would like to link. As you may know, once an image is linked in Vernon, they have to remain in the same file location for the system to recognize them. Otherwise, if you move it, delete it, rename it, the system will lose it. It is therefore important that your linked image locations are accessed by as few people as possible and edited by even fewer. At HHV, we have a NAS server, and with this NAS server, our folder labeled Vernon linked content, as you can see here, is only shown on certain devices. Digitizers and photographers export their images into a new folder within this folder using a naming convention such as date name or date subject. The image linker then selects the relevant folder and renames it with a done prefix. It's counterintuitive, but it must be done, otherwise, as we said, Vernon will lose the folder. You can then tell Vernon where to look by, of course, going into your image directory and picking the appropriate folder. Finally, we move to matchmaking, and this is where we prompt Vernon to make the matches between your file names of your photos and the Vernon records themselves. You simply click the Display Matches button, and it will show you if there are any errors in your files that do not follow the correct formatting or don't match any records in your system. Throughout the entire process, it's important to ensure that your file names match the artifact. This is especially important at Howick Historical Village, where we work with a digitization team who are mostly volunteers, and it may be very simple to make a small mistake, a misstep, or a typo that leads to a photo of a plate being linked to a pot. Once you've ensured there are no errors in your file naming, you can then prompt Vernon to create your records with the Create button.
As mentioned before, our default is to link as primary image, but this is something that we do change. Basically, telling Vernon to link as primary image means when you are linking it, the last image you are updating, it will make it the first image. This is really handy if you have older images on your Vernon records, but it creates the problem that if you're linking multiple images to a single record, your last image becomes your first image. That's fine if you can think ahead and plan for this when you're taking photos, but you can also use a system monitor to reorder the images, which is just down there. There's also the reason that we can enable or disable this is if I know that we've just done an XML import and all of these are brand new records, we can unselect this and then we don't have to worry about the system monitor step.
At Howick Historical Village, we've implemented some additional steps to this process, which includes, as we work with a lot of volunteers, including an extra double checking element to our process. Although a lot of our volunteers are very skilled in some places, file naming conventions can often be unfamiliar and overlooked. So we use this additional verification step to ensure consistency and accuracy. This is carried alongside the display matches step, and it simply involves bringing up a list of all the artifacts intended for image linking and confirming that the picture that we have matches the object title and description. Without doing this, we've run into some issues such as this error here, where the first one is not matching an object because what was the error behind that one? I remember the 2025.48.10 was actually 2025.18.10 and was a simple typo issue. Of course, without the double checking process, you end up with this lovely screenshot from our eHive where we have a very strange looking petticoat. At Howick Historical Village, as we currently do not have the budget for the Vernon browser platform, we use eHive, and we periodically upload images to our eHive platform using the old records that we have from when we previously used eHive as our main platform.
So extra steps at Maritime rely on the lists that are produced at the end of the image linking. So Vernon will give you a list of your AV records it has created and also for your objects that have been updated. We always save both lists. This is helpful to have reference if you notice something has gone awry with your upload. And it's also good because we use the lists to bulk update production details for our AV records. So this includes photographer, role, and date. This is easy because how our folders are saved is by date and person. So each list produced from our bulk update will have the same person and date that those photos were taken. So we can just upload those for bulk updates all at the same time. At Maritime, we also have browser, so we can use the object list to upload that to browser in one easy step. And then as an added step, we have a folder in the Vernon portfolio that is simply for us to save our object list. So our library manager and our registrar can check what's going online. And then because they're checking via Vernon, if they're like, oops, that shouldn't go online, they can just very quickly take that off and that's not a problem. The other tool we have known to use time occasionally is as Lee mentioned, to see which folders have been imported, we add done in front of the folder. But because this is at the start of the process, it might get forgotten occasionally. So you might have uploaded a whole bunch of AV records that don't have the done, and then you can't just go add the done on the folder because it's just going to break the link. So we do sometimes, very rarely, use text find and replace. And that means what we can do is we can update the digital file name to include done, so we don't have to relink all of those AV records.
The bulk linking process for our institutions work and fit into our standard cataloging process and can be left running while we perform other tasks. It only works if it makes sense within your own institution's workflow. It may be that you start with a process very similar to us, but it will change over time as you find the need for small changes. Eventually, you'll reach the point where you, like us, can just click go and then check your emails while it processes in the background.